Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is supported by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Telecommunications Access Minnesota, and Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and online at nisswatax.com.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Lakeland Currents, where this evening we're talking about wolves. One of my favorite topics. I've been interested in wolves all my life, and I'm really excited to have as a guest Peggy Callahan, who was here with us a year ago. And Peggy is the Executive Director of the Wildlife Science Center in Forest Lake, Minnesota. And she is, without a doubt, one of the most knowledgeable people that I have ever met when it comes to the issues of wolves. Peggy, thank you for coming. I had a little trouble getting it all out, but thank you for being here.
Well, Ray, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for the compliments.
And when you were here last year, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about what the Wildlife Center is, so maybe we could just do that for a few minutes and let people know what it is that you do, because uniquely, a lot of work you do is with other animals besides wolves. And then, before we get completely on the subject of wolves, we need to talk just a little bit about your passion of dogs on the sideline, because people are going to be amazed at that too. But just, what is the Wildlife Science Center? What do you do there?
Well, we actually took over what was a federally funded gray wolf research facility. I worked as a federal biologist there for 5 years, and when the federal funding ran out, there were these 40 gray wolves in this facility, and there was no funding and no direction. And so I quit taking grad classes and decided to create a nonprofit. And my fantasy really was and is that we need to get more kids interested in getting outdoors, and I wanted to be something other than a Walt Disney facility. We wanted to do science-based programming and reach out to kids that are not necessarily traditional learners, but I firmly believe that kids get outside, they learn in a different way. And now, of course, we have evidence, we have research to suggest kids need to be outdoors. So we created this nonprofit, and it's based in training. We train wildlife biologists on how to capture and safely handle and chemically immobilize animals. We conduct research there on behalf of oftentimes managers, sometimes captive managers, and we also do education, and that piece I'm most proud of. I have 2 licensed science teachers that work for me, and they reach out to K through 12 in college and beyond, so it's a really awesome
And how big
program.
is your particular facility?
Right now we have, our collection is about 100 animals, and 58 of them are wolves. We are part of the captive breeding program for both Mexican gray wolves and red wolves, so we house animals from both of those federal programs. But we also have gray wolves from other places in the country, including out west, some from Canada. We have wolves from the Central Great Lakes, the animal that we're more familiar with. And we also have coyotes, we have foxes, we have cougars, bobcats and lynx, the 3 cats from Minnesota. So we have a variety of critters there.
Are there other facilities like yours in other states that are doing what you do, or are you pretty unique?
I think we're completely unique. Nobody combines the things that we do, and so it makes it a very interesting experience for folks that come there. The students that come there actually participate and get to see the science firsthand. If we have an animal that needs to be immobilized for any reason, a medical reason, the children are there, the kids are there, and they get to listen with a stethoscope to the heart or take a pulse or help us monitor respirations. So it's a very hands-on kind of experience.
I might say, if the viewers are hearing a noise, that's our wild wolf that we have here on the floor, which is actually her German Shepherd, big, beautiful black German Shepherd that looks like a wolf, but it isn't. But anyway, when I first heard of your science center, I was thinking, well, you probably have 4 or 5 wolves. When you have, you said 58?
We have 58.
That's
yes.
An incredible amount of wolves. And how big of an area, acreage-wise, would they be in?
Well, there is such thing as too large. We all can agree there's too small of an enclosure, but our animals vary from a couple of acres to smaller because we need to be able to catch them. So we need to be able to give them their vaccinations annually, monthly heartworm. We also need to be able to protect them from fly strike in the summer. So that's one of the things we do is we capture all of our animals. So it depends on the size of the group. I mean, I think we have a fantasy about a wolf pack living together like a human family their entire lives, and that's simply not accurate. So if I have a group of animals together now, in 4 or 5 years, you will see aggression amongst those animals. In the wild, biologists have documented entire changes in pack, 100% turnover in 5 years or fewer.
Wow.
So we have to be prepared to manage them that way, so that if we have conspecific aggression in a social group, we've got to pull them out of there and set up another setup.
So as you have pups in the spring, what happens to those pups? Do you keep them in your facility?
We keep them in our facility with very few exceptions. There are a handful of educational facilities across the country that do have animals on loan from us. The International Wolf Center is one. There are a number of zoos that have wolves from us. But we don't sell, and we loan them. And we really, if puppies are born at our facility, they're born because of the result of a research project. So we do study ways to try to increase reproductive success on behalf of a really endangered species of wolf, the Mexican gray wolf. So we use our very successfully reproductive animals from Canada, Alaska, Minnesota, etc., to study the problems that these Mexican gray wolves have gone through because there were only 7 left alive in 1979.
Wow.
So
how many do you expect that there are now?
In captivity, there are close to 300, but in the wild, there are about 50. So,
really?
Yes.
So most of them are in captivity.
Right. And unfortunately, they're dependent on captive breeding, which is the worst thing you can do because we don't mimic Mother Nature very well. And actually, there's no domestication that takes place. The federal government manages this program, and wolves are bred based on DNA, coefficients of relatedness, and things like that. But you can imagine that with 7 founders, there are some impacts on their reproductive success, like they're seeing on Isle Royal, where there's been no genetic introgression on that island for so long that they are seeing some effects.
Mm-hmm. I've been watching that, some of the
Yeah,
reports on that.
some interesting stuff. So obviously the wolves in Minnesota, the Central Great Lakes, don't require anything like that, and there's never been a captive breeding program for the wolves in the Central Great Lakes. So that's unique to the animals in the southwestern part of the U.S. and the southeastern part of the U.S.
You said that wolves that are bottle-fed are the most dangerous. Would you just explain that for us?
Yes. I think there's a huge misunderstanding and confusion, hello, McLean, between captivity and domestication. Captivity is not the same as domestication. This is domestication. And he would be horrified to hear that one of the things that we have done is reduce their cranial capacity after thousands of years of selecting against what makes a wolf wild. So if you bottle feed a wolf, all you do, or a tiger, or a bear, or any other wild animal, you don't change the nature of the beast. You simply take away one of the behaviors that keeps us safe, and that is fear of humans. So all that we do if we bottle feed a wolf is enter into their social hierarchy, which is one that involves aggression toward leaders when given an opportunity. So if I bottle feed, I sort of by default become a higher ranking pack member and thereby a target for overthrow.
Wow.
So it's a dangerous proposal to hand raise. And one of the reasons why I am adamantly opposed to petting and touching and using wolves on leashes or any wild animal on leashes in education programs. I think it's terribly misleading.
Well, before we get into the wolf issue in Minnesota, tell us about your work with dogs. Because when you told me this, I thought you were kidding me, but you're not kidding me.
I'm not kidding. I came by my interest in wolves kind of the back way, not falling in love with wolves like a lot of folks. I fell in love with dogs and was fascinated by. I grew up with a German Shepherd, and of course I thought he was part wolf, and he wasn't. But what fascinated me as I got older was if you want to understand your dog, you study the ancestor, and that is the wolf. They are. Every dog we have from Chihuahua to St. Bernard right now, DNA says descended from a gray wolf. So obviously their behaviors are watered down, and yet when you get greeted by your dog, the behaviors that you're seeing are wolf behaviors. So I got involved in rescue. Unfortunately, that's something that's common and needed some time ago, and started to discover that a dog pack was a wonderful way for me to learn more about working with my wolves and to train my volunteers. Well, at this point, the need for rescue is phenomenal, and we have a sanctuary with 95 dogs that have all been abused, neglected, or both.
And you're saying a sanctuary, I need to have people understand, we're talking about your house.
My home.
Your house. You
Yes.
and your husband.
My husband
house.
and my 12-year-old daughter. She is just as much a staff member.
So you have right now you have 94 dogs that come into your house at night.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. And it's really from all different backgrounds, all different breeds. One that just arrived is a completely feral dog. It was very, very badly beaten. And so I'm the only one who can touch him, and only a little, and only sometimes. So my daughter and my husband can't approach him yet. So it'll be months and months before he feels comfortable enough. But he comes in for food. He's motivated by food. Everything is. So it's a fascinating, frustrating because you see the dark side of humanity. We had a dog with his throat slit by his owner, and so you see some sad things. But it's fascinating to me to watch the pack and watch the cooperation and watch the hierarchy, et cetera.
So the last time you were on last year was about this time, I would say, and we started hearing about the issue of delisting wolves. Obviously, wolves are a protected animal in Minnesota, most states, and the government has been moving towards delisting them because there are supposedly more than we can handle in Minnesota. And there are groups that are really vehemently opposed to this. And I think it's fair to say that for the people that, and I'm a hunter, and the people that are out in the woods, it's becoming more common to see a wolf. So obviously the timber wolf, the Canis lupus, is becoming more prevalent in our area. So you have really, I think, a healthy perspective, at least from my view anyway, about this issue and what needs to be done. Tell us what you're thinking.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit and talk about population, because I think we get really caught up in numbers. And the estimated population here is around 3,000, give or take. And
when you say here, you mean Minnesota?
Yes, just in Minnesota. Just
okay.
in Minnesota. And, Wisconsin and Michigan also are. It's biologically speaking, it's one population because that flow, that genetic flow, is obviously moving back and forth. And Canada was a source population for Minnesota. But when we're talking about legal boundaries, Minnesota has about 3,000 wolves in the state, and that is twice the number that was arrived at by biologists some years ago in the 70s as recovery goal. So recovery goal was 1,200 to 1,500, and so we've obviously exceeded that 2 times. So, and it isn't that we see biologically that wolves are exceeding their carrying capacity, which means they're depleting food, et cetera. We're not seeing that, but there is a cultural impact on us that needs to be addressed and needs to be faced. And the Endangered Species Act is not designed to hide a species in perpetuity. It's designed to protect a plant or animal until their population has recovered to a point where the state can manage it without full protection. And that's been obviously true about wolves for quite some time. So the delisting efforts started in 1998, and with an announcement by then President Clinton. Bruce Babbitt was the Secretary of Interior. And after the delisting announcement, there was litigation by a number of what I consider the perennial litigants, folks groups that sue every time. And so that court case stretched on for quite some time. In 2004, under then President Bush, Gail Norton was the Secretary of Interior and announced delisting. Ironically, both of those announcements took place at the Wildlife Science Center. We
Really?
had great big parties, yeah. Secret Service, big parties, federal officials,
No
yay,
kidding.
we're going to delist, and pop the champagne, and again, litigation. So the wolf was delisted briefly in 2006 or 7, 11 months or 13 months or something like that. They were delisted. Lawsuit put them back on the list, and there they have stayed since then. So this has stopped being about biology a long time ago. This is about politics. And so taking the wolf off the endangered species list, it's not synonymous with extirpation. And that's what people think. If we're going to take it off the endangered species list, that means we're going to wipe it out again. And not only is that not the plan, legally there are safety nets in place, federal safety nets, that if the wolf population dips below a recovery goal, then there are automatic relisting processes that take place. So this is not a concern. In addition to that, the Minnesota DNR is stacked with incredibly bright, capable managers that have been managing wolves in this state, just not under state law since wolves have been here. So the fears, I think, are not founded in reality that something bad is going to happen when we delist. With that said, one of the things that frustrates me a little is when I hear hunting discussed, and I fully support a take of wolves. We can. They're a harvestable species. The U.S. Department of Agriculture right now has a lethal control program in the state, and they end up, and in response to livestock loss impact, and they take 200 wolves a year. So we certainly, and it's not obviously not impacting the population, we certainly can hunt wolves. It's of course we can. I think we as hunters need to be careful not to say we must hunt wolves, because I think that opens us up for a different form of litigation. We can hunt wolves, and we must manage wolves. We must have some way of managing wolves, and that takes on a lot of different forms. We can hunt them, we must manage. Which brings up another point, Ray, and well, first of all, back to delisting. Delisting this time around, the waters have gotten very muddied by a new genetics study that has reared its ugly head, in my opinion, and that is that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's geneticists have decided and declared that there is a separate species of wolf in the Great Lakes, separate from the gray wolf that we consider the Central Great Lakes wolf, called the eastern wolf. And that separate individual, that separate species, has been identified by DNA. And although it's not clear to me whether or not morphology is something you could see right off the bat, what it has done is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is mandated then by law to assess the population and how this animal will be impacted by delisting.
So they're going to look at wolves as almost two separate species,
right.
And now the numbers are different.
And what a mess. And what a mess. Frankly...
what is it that they're seeing in the genetics that make them think that there's a different group?
It's an eastern origin. It's a different animal, looking at the DNA. And that's open to interpretation. And so there is a group of geneticists in California that don't agree with this. So for those of us that whenever genetics is being talked about, I have to hold onto the desk and try really hard to understand it. It's very confusing. And let's talk about it from a pragmatic standpoint. These wolves they walk like wolves, they talk like wolves, they live like all the other gray wolves in this region. So to discuss a separate management plan to me seems short-sighted. And let's just say, let's give it to them. Okay, yes, there's a separate species here. Cool. They're fine. There's no evidence at all that they are doing anything, that they're not depleting or going away. They breed readily with gray wolves. So am I going to have to do a DNA test every time to know whether or not this is an animal we need to regulate? And the crossover in terms of morphology, this could be just a small regular gray wolf or a big eastern wolf. They're a little smaller.
Oh, okay.
The eastern wolf is supposedly a little smaller.
Okay.
But, I had a wolf I have wolves brought to me from the wild. I had a wolf that was brought to me in 1987 that was eating sled dogs in northern Minnesota. She was 65 pounds. So, and she was a big, healthy breeding female, 65 pounds. That's not a very big animal. So does that mean she was an eastern wolf? Or, to me, it's a very difficult question and will open the door for litigation to prevent delisting, in my opinion. So
the delisting movement then would actually come from the federal,
right, at
the federal level. And the state is supportive of that, at least from the state DNR level?
Absolutely.
So the issue isn't it isn't that the officials are against it, it's at any level.
No.
It's that there are other groups opposed to that. Correct. Because they don't like PETA and other groups probably bigger than PETA that have more
Humane
influence.
Society of the United States is one of them that's opposes delisting. Center for Biological Diversity opposes delisting. There are some other smaller groups that also do, but those are the big financial players. So, and unfortunately, when these groups sue and win, the federal government picks up the legal fees. So
they do.
Oh, yes.
To fight it in court.
Right.
Sure, that makes sense.
And so, millions of dollars later, we are fighting a battle that has long since left biology, and it's very, very frustrating, and in my opinion, bad for wolves, and bad for the Endangered Species Act. This will erode the act because the act is being used inappropriately.
If the wolves in Minnesota were delisted, would that mean that there would be X number of wolves that would be allowed to be hunted, like a quota, like we have on Fish and Mille Lacs or something? Where they would try to manage that number? Is that how they would manage it, or how would they do that?
Right now, that decision hasn't been made, and that would be made at the state level. There was a time there where there was actually a 5-year moratorium on a public take. Well, the legislature took that away, and I think a little prematurely. But the point is that no one's decided how wolves would be taken. Would it be a hunt like they have in Montana and Idaho? And most of the wolves that are taken in Montana and Idaho are incidental take when people are elk hunting or deer hunting. So it would be very challenging to go hunt wolves. I mean, I don't even know how you do it, other than the way you would hunt deer. And many of us see wolves when we're in deer stands, so that probably would be it. But those decisions haven't been made, and the DNR has never put a cap on wildlife. They've never said, we're not going to tolerate any more wildlife than this. They've had a very scientifically based predator management program that means tolerate the predator unless it misbehaves. And then if it's a fur bearer, which it is, then it's an animal that you can legally harvest during certain seasons. And there are zones where they'll be more protected than other zones. So it's, their management system has been based on very sound science. So they're not saying we won't tolerate too many wolves. That's never been part of the discussion.
In Minnesota, maybe you could just talk a little bit about how are these wolves survive? What is their world in Minnesota? How are they living, and where are they living?
Well, if you compare a wolf in Minnesota to a wolf in Montana, the wolves in Montana work much, much, much harder. They have territory sizes of 400 to 500 square miles for a pack of 6, and the wolves here in Minnesota, 10 square miles, because our prey densities are unprecedented. We have changed the face of Minnesota. There are no more woodland caribou. The moose population is dwindling to nothing. The elk, we've got a handful of elk. Bison are gone. And so we have really kind of a monoculture of white-tailed deer. And they have moved artificially north. They didn't live that far north until 1900 was the first time deer got to the North Shore. And the wolves are thinking this is fabulous because the prey densities allow wolves to live in unprecedented densities. Mm-hmm. So we're not going back to old Minnesota. This is new Minnesota with higher populations and densities of black bears. I remember some time ago hearing that the carrying capacity for black bears would be 8 to 10,000, and they've exceeded that. So it's closer to 20,000 bears now. So it's really an interesting. We just sit back and watch and see what happens. The problem with our population of wolves, it's not the number, it's when wolves come into conflict with human beings. And one wolf can do that. We could have a very small population of wolves and one wolf can come into conflict. So there's another piece to this whole argument that unfortunately Congress has messed up completely, and that is they have lumped the federal U.S. Department of Agriculture's Wildlife Services Wolf Control Program with delisting somehow. Oh. And they have eroded the funding. It's gone. Those people have gotten their termination notices. And that is a program that producers have depended on for 35 years.
Wow.
And it's so short-sighted. And hearing our congressional representatives, although I'm frustrated beyond belief that I can't get them to respond to me. They are saying, well, once we delist, then it will be all fine. First of all, wake me up when we delist. Second, delisting and wolf control in livestock situations are completely different subjects. Delisting is handing the state management plan for wolves. It probably will involve a harvest of some sort, trapping, hunting, whatever, and the animal then becomes a state animal that can pay for itself and pay for its management. Thousands and thousands of people bought permits in Montana, 18,000 permits.
Wow, for a wolf.
Yeah.
Wow.
So much money could be generated. But in the state of Minnesota, the U.S. Department of Agriculture goes to producers. They drive hours and hours to go to producers. And
you're talking like cattle producers, sheep producers.
Sheep producers, turkey growers, anything. If a wolf comes onto your farm and impacts your livestock, you get a response within 24 hours. And a live body goes there. And you can't make up for the 35 years of experience identifying what kills it.
Yeah,
and these folks are, I know them. I've worked with them. I've watched them. They're not biased. They're not. And sometimes deliver very bad news to the producer. This is coyotes. This was a dog. This was a bear. In which case, then it's up to the producer to deal with. But when it is a wolf kill, right now, that U.S. Department of Agriculture personnel stays on that farm and traps and kills the offending wolves until there isn't activity anymore. And there's actually science to suggest, research has been published to suggest, even their activity of setting the traps, etc., will deter wolves. So this is a win-win. And talk about it from a wolf's advocate position, Ray. The wolf lovers love this program. Even HSUS loves this program because it's good for wolves. It means we don't have the shoot, shovel, and shut up going on this, to the same degree. And producers, if they know they have these guys to come and take care of business, which they do, then they don't take action into their own hands. So I am horrified that our congressional representatives, and it was a federal level, cut this earmark. Earmark is a swear word these days, and it's $500,000 a year. That's nothing. That's nothing in terms of the state budget. It's nothing in terms of the USDA budget. That is nothing for what we get. And here's another rumor. And the rumor is, of course, that, well, the trappers and the hunters will take care of that. As a hunter, I'm going to tell you, no one is going to go drive the hours to shoot a wolf in July when it's in summer coat. It's not valued at anything. And it's hours of work, and you don't just walk up and shoot them. It's cunning and experience. And a good friend of mine is a trapper and is actually on the board of directors for the Minnesota Trappers Association, and he feels very strongly it's a mistake to be educating these wolves with these inexperienced trappers. All you're going to get is a whole lot of college-educated wolves that are going to understand traps in a different way, and they'll be much more difficult to catch.
We're out of time. You can believe it already. But it is so interesting, and you bring such a wealth of information here. Thank you for being here. We might have to do this again. We're not through with all of the issues yet, and I know it's not going away. It's going to be here for a little while. Just to get back a minute to the Wildlife Science Center, you're located in Forest Lake. You're a nonprofit, and if people are interested in donating to your organization, I would guess they could go to your website.
Absolutely.
The wildlifesciencecenter.com or .org in Forest Lake.
Right.
And it's a great organization. I know people from our last show came down and visited your facility, and were very impressed with it. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Ray. I love being here.
You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. And we'll be back in January. We're going to take a little break over the Christmas period, and we'll see you again in January. Thanks for watching.